Right, everyone, welcome to Ozrai Tales. I'm gonna do another episode of Coffee with Spirits, and after the intro session, coffee. After the intro video, I was thinking about it and realized that I have not really talked about why I'm here, and kind of my journey. I was still on my self-worth. Do you have things that matter? Like, do you have things to bring to the world and to the collective? Um, and part of that self-worth is being like, okay, introduce yourself, kind of. And we're going to let spirit take the wheel, but I think it's important for people to understand, what makes me qualified, to take on this mission of helping guide people through creation towards their path of ascension and just from life experience and all of those things. So that is what we're going to do today, and really kind of set the foundation and do a full introduction and just kind of explain from my past and everything that I've been through on a spiritual level, why I'm here and why I feel this calling and feel the need to help in my healing of others through life or experience or just the ups and downs. A lot of those tower moments. I'm not going to be using any tarot cards today. I'm really just going to have a talk back and just take you through my timeline of this incarnation and explain a few things. So I'm going to do that while I put on my unicorn face because that is how I feel inside. That's who I resonate with. And it's been, I was kind of realizing yesterday, especially because yesterday was my mom's birthday, though she has already passed. And it's the first birthday of hers since she's passed. So while I was, doing a memorial for her, which is behind me, and setting that up and making sure that, her connection was there, I was able to, just check in with her where she's at on her next incarnation and where she's headed into the next life. And while I was doing that, I came across this book that I wrote in the fifth grade. So we had a writing assignment to just think of a story or something like that where, we could create it in the class, write in the class, create illustrations for it. And at that time, we're talking like 1994, 95, I found this book. Can't tell it's a unicorn. There we go. So it was a unicorn, and being at that time assigned male because I am trans, it was probably a little weird for a lot of the kids. Like, why does this boy have a unicorn book? But I loved it. I was drawn to it, and my story that I chose to write at that time was the true story of Rumpelstiltskin. So I don't know if any of y'all around my age at that time remember, but there was a storybook author who wrote the true story of the Three Little Pigs, and it was like a different retelling, but where it's kind of like the wolf wasn't like a bad person, a bad guy, or bad girl, or bad wolf, really. It was just like a series of miscommunications. And it was more of like the Three Little Pigs were the ones that were really, you know, not very nice. And so, at the time, I didn't realize that I resonated with Rumpelstiltskin so much because of the name sake. It's like, guess my name, which as a trans person now, it's like very telling, right? It was a sign at that time, I think, that was like, this name is not something you resonate with. This isn't your name. This is something else. And so now that I look back, I see that as kind of a stepping stone into who I was becoming. And the next year, I think it was, I actually started to go by my middle name, and nobody would really accept it. And so then a couple of years later is when I found the name Aaron, which is my name. So I was 15 when I found that. So I'll just take you back kind of the beginning, and I'm going to put on the makeup because, it does help get me in connection with thoughts, messages, anything that I'm creative but focusing on, my creativity. It really feels like really opens up the gate and opens up the bridge towards being able to connect with spirit. And though I love my tarot cards and my crystals and all of those types of divination that I use, I do like that feeling of going within while I'm creating how I feel inside on the outside. So I'm going to try to do it all. But really, it's a little easier because even though Spirit's here, and even though Spirit's a focus for these talks, Spirit's very much telling me, like, go for it. Like, this is you, roll with it, set the stage, we'll say. If it seems a little performative, welcome. I don't see how performance art or performance, especially when you're a performing artist, is something that should be looked down upon. I think that we're all allowed to find spirit in our own way, and that's the whole point. We don't all have to resonate and do it in the same way. So, welcome to your first makeup with spirit. So to take you back, I was born in 1984. I had two parents that were in a pretty dysfunctional marriage. They both were raised in completely different environments, but both felt a serious lacking of being understood by their family, I think. For my mom, it was her finding out in her later on, like early 20s, that she was adopted by her father, and that her father was not her birth father, and that they didn't know much about her birth father. And my dad was raised in a pretty dysfunctional, kind of abusive living situation. So while my mom was kind of raised to, by two parents that fiercely loved each other and really cared about each other, and, were about raising a family. And I think it's very telling that my grandfather wanted to raise my mom as his own because that's how he felt. He felt like that was his daughter. And it really did affect my mom later because she felt like she'd been lied to. But that also kind of hindered her from developing her own marriage situations and caused her to turn towards a lot of addiction and things like that. So she was lost. They were both very lost. When I was born, it was a little chaotic. I mean, I don't know, because I don't have the ability to have children, but I know having a first child is very like we'll see what happens, right? we're gonna do this. We're gonna make it happen. Like there's a kid involved, so they were trying. We'll say, and while I was you know coming into about a year old, a little over a year, I got really sick and got this really bad fever. They couldn't get me to eat. It got to the point where finally my mom was like, we need to take them to the hospital. Um, and they take me to the hospital, and the doctors are trying to help me. And I'm still not eating. I'm still not taking water. I'm not taking fluids. And it got to the point where they were like, we don't know what else to do. We can't get an IV into them. We can't get them to take fluids. Like, we're really kind of at a loss. We don't know what to do. And my mom was like, we're gonna lose them. Like they're dying. Like we're like we need somebody. We need something. And so into the room walks this nurse that nobody knew. My parents didn't recognize. Um, I'm sure the people that worked there were familiar, but the overall feeling of it was like this person just glides into the room that has no part of my care whatsoever. So they immediately walk up, they take me into their arms, and they took an IV and they placed it right here into my forehead. Just seamless, right in. I took it and they started to put, fluids into me. So they were able to save my life. We continue with our lives, I continue on. And then I have two siblings. So they were both born. After my third sibling was born, we're like 3 years apart. I My parents just kind of their marriage um, crumbled, right? They were trying at this point. I think they had tried, a couple of separations. The addiction was still really bad in the marriage, and finally they separated completely and started to um, divorce proceedings. So when I was 8, we were living with my father because my mom could not take care of us because of her state. And the state as well had said, we're going to give sole custody to the father. And then she had to go and check herself into a rehabilitation. So around this time, I was like around 8 years old, and I got sick again. I got a fever, a really bad fever. I couldn't eat, I couldn't take fluids, and for some reason, my dad didn't want to take me to the hospital. And I don't know if it's because at the time they were both, he was really just trying to prove himself to his parents and to everyone that like he could do this, or, he just was pretty neglectful still, even when we lived with him. And he, I don't think, wanted people to see that, right? It was more of like a ego pride thing. So instead of taking me to the hospital, he contacted a couple of friends of his who were spiritual. They had a couple of sons, and they were vegetarian. They were very much, I guess, what you would call back the New Age. Um, and so they brought over crystals. I remember them being there, and I was still, I guess, probably really out of it because of the fever. Um, but they brought crystals. I remember candles. I remember like smoke, so I had to have been like sage. And I was kind of in and out of the ritual, but I do remember like waking up the next day and I was healed. Like no fever. The only like damage that really happened to my physical body was I lost about 60% hearing in one ear. So my right ear is hard for me to pick up a lot of things. I hear a lot more things in my left ear, but definitely caused some damage. And we continued on with life. So by the time I was 8, I already had these like two near death experiences where I was kind of like in and out of this world and the next and the beyond. Um, and of course, now we've had some ritual, we've had some healing, actual like spiritual healing. So after that, I just kind of continued on in life, like as a kid. Still went through a lot of trauma, went through a lot of abusive situations, like survived, got in this like fight or flight mode. I really wasn't allowed from my father any kind of guidance outside of him. So if it wasn't coming from him, if it wasn't something he gave me, if it wasn't something he taught me, then it didn't matter. And I didn't need a higher power. I didn't need spirit. I didn't need any of that. And he was very abusive. He was sequestering us into kind of this like box, and then to this like cult-ish environment, right? Where it was like, you don't need to think for yourself, I'll think for you. The only way that I could experience anything other than home life and school life, where I was still being, condensed into who I was supposed to be in the public eye, was by going to church because my stepmom, who my dad met when I was 9, she was Methodist, and she believed that, though we weren't like super Christian, we were still like God, like new agey spiritual things are not allowed, right? They were kind of like looked at as like devil worship. So I would go to church, and I would, every most churches that I went to with Christianity were very much aware of my effeminate nature, and they were aware of, you know, my queerness, and in a lot of teachings for different denominations of Christianity, you're not allowed to be that, right? It's a sin. And I wasn't aware at the time that I was queer. Definitely didn't know I was trans. Um, and I would be told all the time, called names, called this, that, sissy, like all kinds of stuff, bad stuff. And I didn't understand why they were saying this about me. I didn't understand at the time, like, what that was. I definitely remember my dad making sure that like if something came on TV, like Ellen DeGeneres came on TV, he flipped the channel. I remember something coming up about Matthew Shepard when that horrible thing happened to him in Laramie, Wyoming. Oops, sorry, y'all. Let me turn that off. I don't want that interrupting. Hold on, y'all. It's my spiritual advisor. She needs my help today. Oh, 10:10 on the clock. Synchronicity! Um, Hold on. Let me wrap up. Okay, sorry. Let her know that I'm talking to y'all. Okay. So I attended several denominations. I tried Southern Baptist, tried Methodist, Episcopalian, um, Seventh Day Adventist, which we'll get to. Just various, if my friend went to a church, I'd go to that church. See if I was about it. Universalist, Unitarian, non-denominational, denominational. Non-denominational is kind of a denomination now. um, Truly, and I was always met with like bullying or praying the gay away, conversion. Um, but it wasn't until I was 15. And note also, we moved around a lot. We moved every 2 years. Uh, that's not an exaggeration. We moved every 2 years. I think I calculated a few years ago and went through all the places we moved, but by the time I was 18, we had moved 32 times all over the country. So I wasn't even limited to like one area of the country where beliefs were a certain way. I was definitely open to the gamut of it all. But when I was 15, we lived in North Carolina, and I was going with a friend of mine who also turned out to be, gay. She was a lesbian, but wasn't out. And she invited me to her Seventh day Adventist church. And so I started going to the Wednesday youth group, and we would go in. We would have a message. We would have liturgy. That's the word, liturgy. um, and just talk about what we were there to talk about. And then after the session, they would release us and offer us to come to their um, service in the main hall. But a lot of times we would just go up on the hill behind the church, and then people would pull out cigarettes, people pull out joints, pull out beers. We're like 15, 14, 15, 16 people. And so it was really hard for me at the time because I was like, we were just in class talking about not doing these things. And now we're up here on the hill every Wednesday doing these things. And so after a few months, after them constantly asking me to come to the service, I was like, you know what? I don't want to go up on the hill today. I just want to go to the service. I want to check out the service. So I go to the main hall, and it's the first time I'm there. And I walk in, and there's a crowd of adults. There aren't any kids my age. And, you know, we start the service, and then about the middle of the service, they were like, does anyone want to come down and be prayed for? And so I go down because I'm like, yes, I want to be prayed for. And at this time, I was starting to wrestle with this idea of being gay and understanding it and having a lot of experiences with other kids and stuff, I shouldn't have been doing. But I guess when you are at a young age and you're queer, you do hit this kind of path. It's like we all go through kind of the same thing, go through like a period of like self-harm. We go through a period of when you're not able to like express it, right? And understand it, learn about it. It's being like held from you. And so you develop a lot of like self-hatred for yourself because you're like, I don't want this. Like, why can't I be normal? Why can't I be like everyone else? And most kids your age are going through the same thing, but everybody's way too afraid to talk about it at that time, especially. And so I was like, I want help. Like, I want guidance. Like, I want to know, is there a better way? Am I really lost on my path because of myself? And so I go down by myself. Nobody else came down to pray, to get prayers. And I, went down to the floor and I closed my eyes and I sat there and, they started to say the prayer and they're like, Lord Jesus, bring guidance to this lost soul, show them that, the way towards salvation, remove from them the sins and this and that. And as, they're talking, I start to feel like a hand on me, right? And I didn't think much of it at first because I was like, okay, maybe it's the preacher, he's laying. Still got my eyes closed. And then I felt another hand. And I felt another hand. And then I felt another hand. And I open my eyes and I am surrounded, completely surrounded by most of the adults. They've all come down and I just have like hand after hand after hand on me. Hand, 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 hand. Just all these hands. People were like talking in tongues. They're like, like just going into this whole like, all of this stuff. And it was just like very frightening. And I felt very taken advantage of. I felt like, why are these strangers touching me? And mind you, I've also been through a lot of um, sexual things that were done to me. Sorry for the trigger. Um, and so, obviously when you've been through that, and even if you don't really remember it at the time, you still have this feeling of like, I don't want people touching me that don't have the right to touch me. And I just totally freaked out. Like, I completely freaked out. And it stopped and hindered my path towards and in the faith of Christianity at that point. Like, just stopped with Christianity altogether. Because, like I said, I've been through many denominations and I'd still been met with varying levels of bullying and hatred and just like the opposite of, this message of love and loving yourself and loving each other and being kind. And, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? And I don't believe that Jesus would make someone feel that uncomfortable or put them in a place where they're wanting to hurt themselves. It's quite the opposite. So I was like, I've tried Christianity. I really have given it my best go. I've really, surrendered myself to it and really, what else is there? If I can't go anywhere because of my father, if I can't find a safe space anywhere out in the world and I don't have a safe space here, where is the safety? Where is the guidance? Where is my path? Am I just going to be lost forever? Am I just going to keep doing these things to myself and my body and wanting to like not be here? And a little bit of another trigger, like time I was 15, I had already contemplated suicide for years and not wanting to exist and not be here because I was a burden and I didn't have a life and I was owned by my father. And I also had attempted in a way by like trying to, smother myself or drown myself a couple of times. And, when I was like 8. And then again around the time that I was like 14. So I wasn't just thinking about it, I was like wanting to accomplish it. And I decided that like I needed to open up my view of spirituality or religion or these things that if I couldn't find them within myself, maybe I can find them outside of myself. And that was where I really started to move from this three-dimensional mindset and into like the fourth dimension, right? And so at 15, I'm already experiencing what it is to be a multidimensional being. I had no idea that's what was happening. Um, and so I started to study, and of course I couldn't go anywhere or be anywhere other than school or home. So I went into the library all the time. I like stay after class, joined a couple of clubs after school so that I could have like an hour in the library. I like stopped going to lunch sometimes. I would just go to the library and study. And so for me to kind of see what else was outside of myself, the only thing I knew to look into was like the elements and, earth, air, fire, water. So I started to just study about the elements, started to read about rock formations, read about, chemistry, read about anything that had to do with, any of the elements. And that led me to a random book, which I have no idea how this was in the school library, but it was talking about Wicca. And I was like, what is Wicca? Like, and so I started to research Wicca. And then I was like, okay, well, this is a religion, like there's different forms of it, but this is a religion. And I was like, okay, so this isn't Christianity. So there's other religions other than Christianity. I had no idea about any of the other religions other than Christianity because of how limited I was allowed knowledge, and especially that kind of knowledge. So I started to like, what are the different religions, And I began to read about Buddhism, Hinduism. Like, I was very drawn towards Greek mythology or like mythology in general. And so I had read a lot about mythology and things like that. I still am just a plethora of knowledge when it comes to Greek mythology. Like, I can talk about it, know so many stories, resonate with just like, was very like, as like kids are into Saturday morning cartoons, I was into Greek mythology, and I, really started to like try and understand what Wicca was. Now, I didn't like dedicate myself to it. It, it was about 5 years when I was like 20 is when I finally did like a self initiation and was like, I dedicate myself to Wicca. I wasn't going to jump the gun. I wasn't just going to like fall into the first thing that seemed right. It was like, I want this to be for me. Like, I want to study. I want to make an informed decision when it comes to my spirituality and what I want to practice. So I had a few friends in high school, and we were chatting, and then we were all kind of misfits, truly. And a couple of them were like, you know what? I've actually been kind of guided to the same thing. Like, I ended up going when I was 15 for a week and checked into a mental health facility in Raleigh because they caught me self harming. And the counselor was like, "You have to go talk to a psychiatrist." And so I went and told them where my feelings were at, thoughts I was having, a lot of really graphic things. And they decided to put me in inpatient. So they diagnosed me with depression and started me on a medication regimen. And I met quite a few different people in there. It took a few days for me to realize that like I didn't need to be there because I wasn't as troubled, we'll say. Like a lot of the things that some of these other kids were telling me were really like disturbing, I felt. And so I was like, I don't like who I am, but I'm not at this level um, of not liking who I am. So while I was in there, met a girl. Her name was Leslie, and she mentioned in the elevator one day that she was Wiccan. My powder. So I was like, wow, I know what that is, and I didn't really say to anybody but her. I was like, I know what that is. And like I remember the teacher from the facility that would teach us was egging her on for it. Just like she thinks she's a witch. Like just very like disdainful about it. And I was like, oh my gosh, like of all places, of all the people that I could meet, I meet this girl. So we had talked a little bit about it when we could, but I did mention to her that like, I'm very interested and I've been researching it and like it's something I'm drawn to. And she was really excited to have someone around her age that was into it too. We never saw each other again after that, but I do think about her a lot because I'm like, I feel like she was placed there in my life, much like that nurse was to help guide me, and save me, even though she was just being herself. And I know that lesson now, when it comes to just being your authentic self, and that's enough. And the people who vibe with it, and the people who don't, and it doesn't make you any less of a person. It just makes you strong in who you are and your values. And, I think that's very important for our youth to understand is developing your own sense of self and just living that. So I go home and I really kind of picked up at that point. I was like, okay, I feel like this is a sign. This is, something showing me that I'm on the right path. So I told a couple of my friends finally, I was like, maybe we should create like a coven. Maybe we should create like a group, where we can all study together and learn from each other, practice a little bit. I definitely wasn't just going to research, I was going to try and put into practice some spells, some work, and I think with magic, that's where like magic really set into me was at that age and where I was like, magic really is just like a culmination of intention and practice and ritual sometimes. And it's just about putting that all together and creating like change, immediate change in your surroundings, shifting the energy of things. And at that time, I didn't really understand much about energy, but I definitely understood that it was real and that it could enact change. I remember talking to my mom on the phone after we had all gotten together and tried to do like an invocation ritual. And remember telling her, what we had done and that I was really drawn to this. What I didn't know at the time and I'd find out at this time, was that my dad would record all of our conversations with our mom or the phone, so he could hear what we were talking about. And he'd been doing it for years. I had no idea. He was just recording it on the answering machine. Because, of course, when the phone would ring, we weren't allowed to answer it. We had to wait for him to be like, it's your mom, right? So he'd hit record, and then he handed us the phone without us knowing. And so I'm telling her about this, and I go to school, and I come home, and my dad's like, I want to have a talk. I'm like, sure. And so he's like, well, I just want to let you know that, like, I was recording your conversation with your mom. He didn't tell me he did it every time, he just said he did it that time. And I was like, why? And he's like, well, because I wanted to know what you were up to, and you don't talk to me. And tell me things, so I just needed to know, what you were up to. Which I'm like, why didn't you talk to me then? Like, you're the parent, I'm the child. Why don't you ask me what I'm doing and what I'm into and seem like you really care? And then maybe I'll tell you what I'm up to and what I'm doing. So he's like, if you want to be a witch, you could be a witch. Your grandmother has friends that are witches. Like, it's fine. It doesn't bother me. You can practice. You don't have to hide it. I'm like, cool. Like, I'm really excited. It's like awesome. I feel like we've really crossed the bridge here. We're really starting to develop a relationship and a safety net. And so I start like collecting the tools and little books and like candles and all this stuff that I had been given by my friends and just things I had found around the house to use, like an athame and like, all kinds of stuff. And I set everything up on my top shelf of my closet, made my altar, and was like really excited. So I go to school the next day, checked out a couple books, went to the public library, checked out a couple of books, brought them home, come to my room, open my closet, and all my stuff is gone. Everything that I put up there, my altar, everything's been taken down. So I go downstairs and, I asked my stepmom, I was like, do you know what happened to the things in my closet? She's like, you're not doing that. I don't care what your dad said. You're not going to practice devil worship in my house. You watch too many movies. You don't know what you're talking about. If you're not going to practice, if you're not going to worship, you're going to worship anybody, it's going to be Jesus. And if you want to go back to church, you can do that, but you're not going to practice devil worship here, ever. Not as long as you live here. I was like, wow, all right, right back to it, huh? I was very upset. And I'm sure, no one that's here listening to this agrees with that, because you wouldn't be here listening to someone talk about spirit if you really believed in anything like that, as far as Jesus is the only, and if you're not going to practice Jesus, you won't be around me, we are fortunate enough now to live in a society where it's not like that anymore. And I'm not going to say to each their own, because sometimes people take that and they start hurting other people. And so if we're going to say, believe, like I've said in my last video, your belief system is your belief system. And what you believe doesn't make it true for others. And, as long as it's not hurting you or anyone else, then believe what you want to believe. But if it's hurting people and all of that, then I'm not down with it. And a 15-year-old who wants to light some candles and worship deities and do all these things that's not hurting anyone should be allowed to do that, I had tried to make Christianity work for me. And at the time, me researching other religions and doing all of that, I didn't realize what I know now about myself is that I'm an omnist. And so I do pull from the belief systems of other beliefs, and anything that feels true or resonates or it comes from a place of positivity and light and love, then I believe and I resonate and I teach those messages. So it's very empowering, I think, to believe in the path towards enlightenment with Buddhism and the cleansing of karma, and with, Hindu, any kind of polytheistic God situation feels very right to me as far as a God structure or goddess structure, because then everyone has their part, everyone has their duty, everyone has their thing that they're in charge of, and that's their realm, and everybody comes together as a collective to cover all sides. So I wasn't allowed to practice, and I just went right back to not practicing anything. I was still studying, I was still researching, but I definitely was limited to my alone time at that point, because my parents did not feel like they could trust me on my own to make my own decisions and to follow my own path. And that I was still lost, even though I wasn't lost anymore, and I was on the path. Thank you. So, y'all gotta thank Spirit. You gotta thank Spirit where spirits do thanks, because we would not be on this path without them. We moved around, continued to move around. I still wasn't practicing, I wasn't believing anything, continued to self-harm, continued to, at this point now, actually attempt suicide a couple more times. But by the time I was 17, I was out the house already. My dad and I had gotten into it finally. I asked him why he was on a power trip. I was a senior in high school. I was like, well, what's your deal? Why do you keep forcing me? Why do you keep holding me down? Why do you keep things out of my life that I'm happy about? And, I was starting to try and date, and he was talking about, not allowed to date, not while I live in his house. Now, if it had been girls, when I had girlfriends and stuff, totally didn't have a problem with it. When I was 16, there was a girl that we were kicking it late one night, and her parents locked her out, so I brought her back to my place to spend the night so she wouldn't have to sleep out on the street. And my dad caught us coming in, came downstairs, heard a ruckus, came downstairs. She was in my room. She jumped in the closet. She was scared, didn't know what to do. Throws the closet open, and he's like, realizes it's a girl, and is like, all right, well, have a good night. And leaves me in there with this girl, and it's like, fine, but if I wanted a boy to stay the night, he was like, hell no. Absolutely not. You can't have boys stay the night. So that right there, there's a girl, he's high-fiving me, and, go get it, go get it, go get it. Even though she was underage. It's like, go get it, go get it. I'm like, hell no, I'm not going to get it. So by the time I was 17, we'd gotten into it. I went to school for a callback audition. Came home, and there was a note on the door and a bag, and it said, have fun figuring out where you're going to sleep. You want to see a power trip? Here's a power trip. And so I went to go stay with my best friend's family, who lived down the street. And I was there for about 3 weeks before he started to, threaten them and be like, well, they're underage. They have to come home. I'm going to call the police if you don't send them home. And so I ended up having to go back to the house. Luckily, I was only there for 3 more months until, I turned 18 and then graduated high school. And I graduated, and the very next day after graduation, packed up my car, took him out to lunch, told him I was moving out, moved out. Then I had to come back because my lease that I had signed with a roommate got botched. He had a girlfriend. We were not getting along. He was trying to force me to do stuff that I didn't want to do. of a sexual aspect, and he went behind my back and had me removed from the lease, had her added, and I had to leave. So I didn't have anywhere to go, so I had to go back to my dad's. So, of course, he thinks this is great because now it proves to him that I can't do anything without him. And, it was hard. I started drinking a lot, even though I was only 18. Um, and, just started to act out. I was like unhappy again, didn't want to be there. I'm still not practicing spirituality at all. And so before I was 19, like a week before I was 19, it was New Year's Eve. I came home because I'd been out for a few days, like a week, I think staying with friends and just couch surfing, being homeless, basically. And I came home and he had moved out. He had packed the whole house up, didn't tell me they were moving, not figuring out where you're going to move in a week and then moving there as an adult. Like, he had paid a deposit on a place, had started to move things without me knowing. Like, I come home and walk through the garage door downstairs where my room was at, and there's nothing in the living room down there. And I walk in the room, and everything that was mine, which wasn't much, was there, but he had taken anything that he had bought or clothing, like anything that he had given me over the years. He had packed it up, taken it. So I basically have like a twin mattress on the floor and a pile of dirty clothes, no note or anything, and I was homeless. I had nowhere to go, and so I started living on the street. I spent my 19th birthday living on the street, spent a few months, luckily found a friend at a random coffee shop on a random night, and we had a random conversation, who I guess just saw my spirit, like saw my heart, like saw who I was. And so he took me in and had a 1 bedroom apartment, and we were roommates. We tried dating, didn't work. But he was the first person who I was able to like open up and talk about like my mediumship, right? And so from a very young age, from the time that I was like 5, I can remember, I would have connections with like entities or other beings in my room. I would have dreams about them, wake up and see like a shadow person at the foot of my bed. I was talking to like my grandmother who had passed away sometimes, was having dreams about her in like the 4th and 5th grade, where I felt like she was like a guide or like guardian angel. Is what I kept thinking, is like she's my guardian angel. And I had been very attuned with like just spirits all the time. Like, even though I wasn't practicing, there were still times where like I was receiving messages. And as a kid, like, that's really, I don't think it's that far fetched. I think that a lot of kids have that ability, especially when you're so young, you're open to it. But of course, I didn't have anyone telling me what it was, and I didn't have anybody like explaining to me that this was mediumship or this was connection to spirit or my guides. This unicorn book, I was lots of unicorn stuff coming through, and like I kept having this like protective energy. I felt, like I would get scared, like most kids, of the dark or things like that. But I always felt protected, and I always felt a sense of like something else being there. So like I really also had this drawing to the name Toby, and I did not know where the name Toby came from. I just knew that I loved that name and that it was like a name that was around me, even though I had not met anyone named Toby. And so what I know now is that it was this unicorn guide spirit named Toby that was protecting me and that was around me. That's why I was so in tune with unicorns and this higher vibrational sense. Y'all, I just saw an orb. That was crazy. It was right here on this side. That was wild. I'm gonna have to watch that. Um, Something. Maybe it was some hair. I don't know, dust. I don't know. That was weird. So Always been in tune with unicorns. Always been in tune with like the fae, with fairies, pixies. These are all elemental beings, and so that's why I think I was called to the elements when I was doing my studies, and I was like drawn to figuring out the elements, which led me to so much. Um, I talked to him about those kind of things, and he was very receptive, even though it wasn't his belief system. He would feel when, like, the first time we had a negative entity, what I would consider demonic or very low level fear energy based, um, and could feel it, feel the energy of it, and like throw a circle of salt around the room, like tell it, to go away. And like he was saying, through praying to Christ and Christ, all of that. And so it was just like, it felt good to have someone that I could talk about it a little bit with that was open to the idea and wasn't so against it. Um, so I was able to start practicing like the Sabbats at that point. Like it was the first time I ever celebrated Yule, was with him, and came home and like created a Yule log and like had all these decorations up, and like was like really showing me that like he wanted to make me feel comfortable and make me feel heard and seen. And we've been friends ever since. We've been, even when we stopped living together, went through a lot of chaos because of myself. And I've always had this ability to kind of tap into the vibration of people's like unhealed trauma. So there have been so many times in my life where I didn't realize that it was me doing that, and then I would like bring up something like a sister they haven't talked to in a year, but didn't know they hadn't talked. I was like, "How's your sister?" And they're like, "Why are you asking about her?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I just thought about her for some reason. Like, y'all okay?" And they're like, "Well, we haven't talked for a year." I was like, well, why? I was like, I don't really want to talk about it. I'm like, okay, not gonna force you. Um, but those kind of things, like very unhealed things, and that is something I've done forever. Always felt like I said the wrong thing at the wrong time, but it really was just me picking up on a vibration from them, and not realizing that's what it was. So I pretty much stayed homeless. Like, I was homeless. I had a couple of apartments in my 20s, but like for the most part, I was constantly like staying on somebody's couch or moving across the country to go live here. Started to get real bad off into drugs at one point, trying to use it as escapism and really like self harm. Put myself in a lot of high risk situations with the sense of maybe I'm not gonna survive through this, and I really didn't find my path, my calling like I have now. And I've struggled with suicide ideation and just that for a long time. I've attempted 6 times. And the last time was September 29th of 2021, before I came out as trans. And I, in that moment, when it didn't happen, felt spirit be like, are you done? I felt like they were like, this, you're not going to make this happen. This isn't how you're going. You're here, and you need to trust in faith and the protection that is around you to know that you are supposed to be here. And, before that September 29th date of 2021, in November of 2019 was when my stepmom, we found out, had stage 3 bladder cancer, and she had lupus. She had a lot of things physically wrong with her for a long time. And so she went into end of life care, and I sat with her and took her through her end of life and through her passing, for 3 days, and came out of it trying to be strong for everyone, trying to be there for everyone, tried to put the celebrations, the memorials, the obituary, like went through the whole process of grief without dealing with my grief, and more of handling other people's grief, right? Until it got to the point where by January of 2020, I was just exhausted and done and was ready to end my life. And as I was getting ready to attempt, I heard her come to me and say, "Boo, it's not time. Just wait. Hold on. Be strong." And I felt so clearly her. Like it felt like she was sitting next to me and literally whispered into my ear. And I stopped. And about a month later, I started to find out the truths about what had happened to me as a kid. I was finding out from relatives. I was finding out about their stories. I was finding out about reasons why I needed to be here. And the fact that if I had attempted and been successful, I wouldn't have been here that month later to be there for those people and to really get the answers that I was hoping for. And so I really just surrendered at that point. I was like, fine, I surrender. Like, I can't make this happen. It's not my job to force myself to be here. So I'm just going to be here without any perceived reasons why. I'm just here existing. And flash forward a few months, but I started my spiritual awakening. I was at home one night and was hanging out by myself, and I had a vision. And in my vision, I saw space, like the cosmos. It was just infinite space, just all around me. And then I heard this like popping noise, and I look, and across every part of space that I could see, there were these pods, these like neon light, indigo light pods that were popping up, and they were just filled. And then one popped open, and I heard indigo, and I came out of the vision. I had no idea what indigo was. I was like, yes, do I love the color indigo? Yes. It's like indigo is my favorite color kid from Rainbow Bright. Like, I just definitely loved indigo and had no idea why. So I started to research, so it's like go into research mode. This is what I've done my whole life, ever since I was 15 at least. It's like, what is this thing? What else is there? And I was able to come across, indigo souls. And it really opened up the whole of humanity, the whole of spirituality, the whole of the universe. That one vision allowed me to break through and to really discover so much about spiritual awakening, so much, being able to go and find the phases of spiritual awakening. Now I'm in the dark night. Oh my gosh, that's what this is. I've lost at this point 6 people and gone through 6 grief cycles of people that I love dearly and who pained me for them to go. And it was showing me that, like, your time here is limited and it's hard, but it comes with experience and it comes with this knowledge of what it is to be human. And that is why we all come here, is to find out what it's like to be human and to move on from there and graduate. And a lot of us have to hit this human cycle multiple times, multiple lives, because it's hard to release this idea of the 3D. It's hard to release this idea of I'm only as good as what I provide. I'm only as good as what I work for. I'm only as good as what I provide for others, and it's really about being stuck in this prison or this matrix, like we're saying now. And when you have your spiritual awakening, which we're all guaranteed that we should at some point in our Earth School travels, that is when you really fully step into your multidimensional beingness, right? And we're all multidimensional in the fact that like we're here in the 3D. Then 4D is like something outside of ourselves, other people, other perceptions. It's like anything not here outside. And then 5D is spiritual, anything external coming through that is not of you and is being given to you or channeled into you. And we all have that fifth dimensional aspect in the sense of our higher self, in the sense of our guides, in the sense of spirits who have crossed, in the sense of spirit, the source, or that creator energy that you call. Like, we're all creators. We are the creators. And for a lot of people, it's a lot easier to acknowledge that creator, higher creator, that creator being, right? Which is all of us together, that oneness. And these are a lot of lessons that you learn on your spiritual awakening and on your path towards ascension, because you stop looking at it just being about you and your survival and all of that, and it really becomes the many, the oneness of everyone together. I am that I am. And it's so important in your journey to surrender at some point and say, I've done what I can with what I know, and now I leave it in your hands, God or spirit or universe or higher self. If you're an atheist, I firmly believe that you believe in yourself. You believe in your higher self. That is you. That is who we're all attaining to be. You do not align with religion or spiritual practice or anything like that. You should hopefully align with you just being the very best person you can be and living in that truth. And that is your higher self. So it's still you, but the highest regarded version that you can be in this in all lifetimes. And you align with that and you live as that person. If you're not doing any of that and you're just here taken from people and not trying to be your best self and using people, manipulating people, being a narcissist, that does not equate to being an atheist. We don't get to use atheism as a reason to be horrible to people, right? Because that is your morality. It's still morality. It's still ethics. It's still how you're supposed to present yourself as your highest version. And we have lived in a life and in a world of people that are only thinking about themselves and just being who they are. Well, that's just who I am. I'm just this person. And I don't believe that. I will never believe that. That's my belief. You could take it or leave it. But if you believe that you're really here to just be a horrible, negative, manipulative person, then I would say that you need to definitely start talking to a professional. You need to talk to your friends. You need to talk to your family. You need to talk to someone other than talking to yourself, because it's not going to help anyone, including yourself, especially yourself, in living a fully productive, joyful, happy life, right? And we get so caught up in just existing and we're not living. And if you get stuck in survival mode, then you're never going to thrive. The only time in our lives that we should be in survival mode is when we're being born, when we're toddlers, and up until the point where we're able to have our own discussions, make our own decisions, collect our own thoughts, process our own feelings. Being able to do all of that means that now you need to thrive, right? And so you shouldn't have to survive until you're, like me, 38 years old, before you realize that, like, I've been stuck in survival mode this whole time, and it has not benefited me for this long, for 3 decades. So what do I need to do to thrive? And this is thriving, It's not much, but I don't need much, In fact, I could probably do with already not even half the stuff, because it doesn't even matter really to me. It shows my personality, it shows who I am, but this is not me. If it was gone, it'd be gone, and I would still have this, and I would have who I am to the core. And that's a beautiful person. That is a gorgeous, lovely soul. And this vessel is now what I make of it, right? And it's not, well, you were born and that's how God created you and yada yada. No. No. I cannot believe that, because I know how I feel. I know what I see when I look in the mirror on the person that I want to see on the outside. And I have the ability to manifest that and bring that into fruition and make that happen, because it's my vessel and it belongs to me and it is precious. It is my temple, and I will decorate this temple how I see fit. And if it leads me to a point where, I change my mind, I change my mind. It's my vessel. And as long as I am using it to follow my calling, to follow my spirituality, to follow this guide to the ascension path. And let me just make sure y'all understand, I'm not saying I'm giving you the answers, not handing you the keys to ascension. I'm just helping you get back on the path. Because if you're here, you feel a sense of being lost, or you feel a sense of being like you're not on the path. And when you get back on the path, then my work is done. And if we never meet again, we never see each other again, great. I will know that I at least helped get you back on the path. And not only that, but I have a calling from my work with grief, with guiding both of my moms into their final stage of ascension, to their passing, to now help people who are moving into the final stage of ascension. One thing that I was able to develop and to evolve and to gain for my work and for my heart and for who I am and for my purpose and for aligning in my spiritual awakening is that I have the ability to soul whisper and to guide people quite literally into their ascension in their last final moments. Through ritual, through my ability to process grief, to acknowledge grief, to call out the stages of grief, the 5 stages. I have done all of this and been aligned with all of this so that I could do this very beautiful and very old work that is now being brought back after thousands of years of not practicing, publicly at least, of being an actual guide into ascension and having the ability to process and help them clear their karma that they've picked up from other people. Because we're not just taking now, because of how the world is and how it had evolved at one time and the pathway that it was going towards, we were picking up other people's karma because of the projection from them, from the deflections, from them not being able to deal with their own. And it does, in a sense, rub off on you, and you do carry other people's karma. And I want people to understand that there is a process, there is a ritual, there is a way that if you are in terminal, life-threatening situations and you are going to pass, it can be cleansed from you. I can take, with my transmutation and my ability with energy work, your karma that doesn't belong to you, put it inside of my body and in this vessel and hold it, keep it separate from my own energy, and transmute that and release it. And when you have passed, be able to then release all of that out from myself. I did this with my mom in her passing in August and had no idea that I was leading up to it, had no idea what I was doing in a sense. I was just letting spirit take me. I was in just mode of grabbing things have collected throughout the years, being able to do this, went to visit her, sat with her, created the space, created the sacred energy, created the ability to absorb and to heal and to remove that trauma and that karma from her that did not belong to her, carry it in my body, and then after she passed, release it. And the sensation of feeling it and being able to go with her energy until she was gone and being able to, in a sense, ride with her up to the gates, up to as far as I could go before I had to release. And that wasn't make-believe. It wasn't something I created. This is very real. And it is the biggest gift that I can give to people now, and is part of my calling in guiding people back onto the path of ascension. But that is the final stage where I will even go as far as to take your trauma so you don't have to carry it to the next life. You do have to clear your own karma. You have to clear the things you did to people, but you don't and shouldn't have to clear away the things that were done to you, that you didn't know how to process and get out of your body, that you didn't know how to release, that you didn't know how to clean your chakra system. I can do all of this. I have learned so much by opening myself up, but this process of becoming a soul whisperer has been my whole life. And just some of the experiences that I've told you, my own near-death experiences, have shown that like there were other entities, other guides that were on my path to help get me on the path, to help guide me back, even though it took years of putting it down, of not dealing with it. But there were constantly people that were brought into my life to help get me back onto the path. So I can recognize it. I can acknowledge it. And I now have the ability to do that work. And I feel very honored and blessed and respected by spirit, and just feel a sense of a calling way more than I ever felt as an artist, way more than I ever felt as a wife, or as a sister, or as a cousin, or as a child, or a daughter, or like I feel this calling of soul whispering is my blessing, and it is my calling, and it is where I'm going to spend the rest of my ascension process helping other people, because I have the ability, I have the knowledge, and I have the heart, and I have the motivation, and I have all of these things that I need to make it happen. So I need people to understand a little bit about where I came from. And this isn't all of it. I'm sure this could be a 6-hour video if we let it be. But the point and the guide of these Coffee with Spirit, these readings, this channel, is to make myself available to people in every aspect, whether it's just a photo that you see, whether it's a reading that you catch, or whether it's you asking me to come and guide your parent, your sibling, yourself into the next stage, into the final stages of ascension, with a clear conscience and with the ability to do the work for yourself and not have to do the work that was put onto you by other people. I really hope that y'all can feel me and you can sense the honor, and that you can see this as not some stepping stone into money or any of that. This is just an open platform, but also has some sort of privacy and some sort of security gate by it being Patreon. And being able to only have the people that are dedicated to getting on the path of ascension, to having the soul whispering done for them or their family in a protective way. And it's not just some public person, on YouTube that's using people, and it's just trying to like do something. Like, I feel very called, and I'm going to make it well known that that's why my main focus of the path to ascension is, if it gets to that point where you're going into your final stage, I will be there. I will help. I will guide. And I will make sure that the people that love you understand and can witness and can be there, just like my family got to sit and witness as I did it with my mom. Two totally different experiences between my stepmom and between my mom, and they all lined up from the end of a cycle, right? It was like the start of the spiritual awakening, 1111. The start of the spiritual awakening was my stepmom passing, and the ending of my awakening was my mom passing. And so it really was the start and end of my spiritual awakening and my growth and my soul growth, and being able to have abilities, not just my mediumship, not just my energy work, like so many more abilities, so many things that I'm able to do just on a vibrational level, just in a way of connecting with people, So I hope y'all understand a little bit more about who I am. I again don't want to come on here and just be like a talking head and just talk about myself, but I wasn't really able to kind of explain in my intro video why and who and what I've been through. And so I hope this like hour and 20 some minutes has helped like explain some of that, but really like the most important thing is like, this is very real. This is very much a thing that's happening, and that more people are going to be attuned with. And it is a culmination of all of my experiences, spiritual, physical, emotional, psychological. It is very much something that not many of us will do, but if you are called to do it, take it, embrace it, accept it, and just know that like you are going to guide and help so many people feel that sense of relief when they go, and not fear, and not feel like they didn't get the opportunity to live. It will give them more peace, and the people that witness it and everyone will feel that sense of peace and release, and it will heal them as well. And we don't have to let people's passing away and grief deny us of an experience of peace in someone's passing. So thank y'all very much for taking the time to watch this and to be here, and I do hope you have many blessings. I know we're in a bunch of retrogrades still, so hold tight. The next month or so, things should even filter out a little bit better. But for right now, just know that, like, if you need anything, we're here. I'm here. Spirit's there. And we will talk soon. All right, y'all. Love and light. Peace. Thank y'all. Thank you. I know. I'll work on it. We'll get us emotional next time. Thank you. She's like, girl, dial it back a little bit. You're good. You're protected. All right, y'all. Love you. Bye.